So this week is the last week of term for Scotland's schools, and the end can't come soon enough for many of the staff, particularly in Aberdeen. Recently, teachers there told the BBC that they are traumatised, fear for their safety, and are scared to go to work because of escalating pupil violence. One said she had recurring nightmares after being attacked. Another described her school as completely lawless. In a survey of 800 members in the city, the EIS union found almost half of them reported violent pupil behaviour in school every day, and more than a third said they'd been physically assaulted. Later today, a number of unions will rally against violent and aggressive behaviour in schools outside Aberdeen's council headquarters. Well, the EIS General Secretary Andrea Bradley joins me now. Andrea, welcome to Politics Scotland. Thank you very much for coming in. Do you know what's behind this rise in violence we're seeing in schools?
I think it's a number of factors. We actually saw this kind of trend emerge pre-COVID, and we think that in large part that's down to the impacts of austerity on young people and the fact that we have so many young people in Scotland struggling with the impacts of poverty at home and in school, and there's significant mental health impact that arises from that. We also think that social media and the kind of toxic impact of social media is a factor in this too, but obviously the impact of COVID has been huge upon young people and their families, and we don't believe that there has been the level of support put into schools and other services to really help young people recover from the significant and serious impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Do you have any idea why would that lead to violent behaviour? I mean, it seems to be a slight leap to say, austerity, COVID, social media results in violent behaviour. Because
all of these things give rise to additional support needs in young people. And of course, there are additional support needs that sit alongside or outside of that sort of like combination of factors that I've outlined there, and our members say to a very large extent that unmet additional support need results in young people feeling alienated, disengaged, frustrated, fearful actually sometimes at school, and that can often manifest itself in aggressive, violent, dysregulated, distressed behaviour that results often in teachers being the butt of sometimes physical abuse, sometimes psychological abuse. And that's something that clearly can't be tolerated, really.
Do parents have a role to play in all of this, I suppose, would have to be a question?
I think it's important to say that schools and parents should always work in partnership in the interest of their children's learning. And certainly if young people in schools are manifesting this kind of behaviour, it should be upon schools and parents to continue to work together to try to support young people so that their behaviour can become regulated and so that they can engage properly in their learning and so that others around them are not negatively impacted by the consequences of their distress. But we think that resource is required to do all of that. We need to have significant investment in additional support needs provision, and we need to have significant investment also in additional teachers to be able to build those relationships with parents and to have time to talk to parents about their children's learning and the kinds of behaviours that young people might be manifesting in and around school.
So you're talking about more funding there. We've just had the budget process from the Scottish Government, and during that, the whole narrative was, they're really scrimping every penny here. They point the finger of blame at the UK government for a lack of funding. UK government says it's giving record funding, but fundamentally there seems to be a bit of agreement that times are tight. Realistically, you're probably not going to get any additional funding here, are you?
Well, we don't believe that cuts to education or underinvestment in education are in any way inevitabilities. How budgets are spent are very much based on political decisions, and also how revenue is raised is very much based on political decisions too. And we think that the political decisions need to be different both at UK and at Scottish Government level if we're going to invest properly in our young people in the here and now, because that will be massive investment in our society for the future. And not only that, but massive savings for our society in the future, because when you don't invest in education properly in the here and now, you pay the price of that for decades and generations to come in terms of criminal justice, in terms of employability, in terms of health inequalities. These are all massively expensive mistakes to make by not investing properly in education.
Now, the rally today is going to be in Aberdeen. The study that we've been talking about was teachers in Aberdeen. Is Aberdeen an exception here, or is Aberdeen typical of what's happening? I suppose a lot of what we've been hearing about is the Aberdeen Council area. Why are we talking about Aberdeen?
So Aberdeen Local Association, EIS Local Association, conducted a further survey of their members locally, in addition to the one that the EIS had conducted nationally on a branch level, which found very similarly to the Aberdeen City results that the this problem is growing. It's growing in its seriousness, it's growing in its scale, and the trend has been there. It's been emerging since before 2020 when COVID struck. And the results in Aberdeen very much resonate with those that we have found nationally and that local associations all across the country are beginning work on. So Aberdeen City is not alone in this.
So you think if other local associations did similar surveys, you'd probably come up with kind of similar results?
Absolutely.
The Education Secretary spoke to us a while back, Ginny Gilruth. She was asked about this report. It seemed from what she said she hadn't fully read it by the time she came off television. I'm just wondering, what did the EIS make of that?
We probably thought that was a little strange. It maybe seemed that she hadn't been properly briefed, given the seriousness of what was being reported in Aberdeen City. It's the third biggest local authority, it's the third biggest city in Scotland, and it seemed maybe a bit of a misstep that she hadn't been prepared for that interview. I think it had also been reported that she hadn't consulted directly with Aberdeen Local Association. We wouldn't expect that to be the case. We would expect national, discussions around these matters to be with the EIS nationally, but to the credit of the Cabinet Secretary, she did have a conversation with me after the fact about it, with a view to looking to see what might be done collaboratively to help address the situation. Initially, Aberdeen City appeared to be less than collegiate in the response to the findings of the Aberdeen Local Association survey. I'm glad to say that seems to have moved on somewhat. That dynamic seems to have moved on somewhat in the last couple of weeks, and Aberdeen City does now seem to be committed to working collegiately with the EIS and the other trade unions whose members are impacted by this.
We spoke a lot about the start about more investment and perhaps how that can help pupils who are displaying this sort of behaviour. I'm also wondering, does there need to be more scope to discipline pupils who are behaving in this way? For example, excluding pupils. Is that an option that's easily available enough to your members at the moment?
Well, excluding pupils is an option at the moment. We would say it's an option of last resort. It should be an option of last resort.
But someone's assaulting teachers.
Well, absolutely. There have to be red lines about what is acceptable and unacceptable behaviour in our schools, because health and safety is a critical factor in this. Health and safety of other children and young people, but also the health and safety of teachers and other school staff as workers. So one of the things that the national report relative to our survey work has called for is a kind of national consensus around what would be an acceptable set of consequences to be deployed in schools in the event that young people struggle with their behaviour, such as many of them are at the moment. Young people have to understand that their behaviour has consequences for others, because just as it does in schools have consequences for others, it will in wider society. And the EIS believes that it would be a professional, shortcoming on the part of teachers if they weren't to teach young people about those consequences of behaviour more widely.
Right, I think we'll have to leave it there, out of time. But Andrea Bradley, General Secretary of the EIS Teaching Union, thank you very much for joining us.